Today, our guest is a man who has virtually done it all in the wrestling business. He's been a referee, the head of talent relations. He's been a blogger, a podcaster, a Hall of Famer, and of course, the greatest wrestling play-by-play announcer and storyteller to ever utter a word in pro wrestling or sports entertainment. And if I could be frank to us, he truly is the voice of a generation. He is good old JR. Jim Ross, thank you for joining the two-man power trip of wrestling.
I'm glad to be with you guys. Thanks very much for inviting me.
What was your impression of calling Wrestle Kingdom 9, and what was your impression of New Japan and those awesome stars that they have over there?
The New Japan thing was really a neat experience. I got, number one, I patched up my relationship with Jeff Jarrett. I've always thought that his wife was one of the coolest ladies in the business, and before she got in the business, she's a piece of work. She's just absolutely amazing. Jeff and I had not spoken since, I think, around 99 or something when he went to WCW. And that was silly. We should have got that out of the way, and we did. And I'm all for his success in Global Force Wrestling. Hope they do great. So that was cool. The experience in Tokyo, renewing my friendship with Tiger Hattori, after knowing him for 25 or 30 years, was good. I found out that I had a lot of fans that on the New Japan roster that follow me on Twitter at JRSBBQ that I never knew. I had great conversations with Tanahashi, who was the champion at the time, and Nakamura. So Nakamura speaks pretty good English, as a matter of fact, and I had done a lot of preparation. I enjoyed working with Matt Striker in a different role, in a different mindset, in a different environment than we had worked together, which is only briefly in WWE previously. So the whole thing, I mean, I wish I could have gotten there a day earlier, so I could have kind of got a little bit more used to the time change and get over the jet lag. That's probably my only regret, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact that I got an 11 by 17 television format run sheet. It was a one sheet, and it was all in Japanese. I enjoyed the fact that the truck forgot that we were there, and that they forgot to count us on the air. They forgot to count us to the video packages. There were only two, I think. And they forgot to count us off the air. We heard nothing from the truck the entire 4 hours. And I think it was a little bit disconcerting for Matt, me being the grizzled veteran. We just forged ahead and called our show. And I think, we settled in, and by the time we got out of those multiple-person matches in the early part of the show, which are hard to call anyway, even if you're familiar with all the guys, and the pace of those matches are so frenetic that it's hard to keep up with what's going on. By the time we hit the mid-card and to the end, I thought that our timing had gotten on the same page, and I enjoyed working with Matt a great deal. He's very bright, but it was a different presentation. I wanted it to be for the viewer to understand who they were seeing, why the match was important, to understand the strategies and the holds that were being utilized, and to feel like they were watching a mainstream sporting event. That was the goal. And not to say things that were eyeball rolling or ridiculous. And I think we succeeded in that by and large. So I had a phenomenal time. And you wonder, hey, look, can you still get it done? Can you still do your work? And I think that we represented the brand, and as far as I was concerned, listening back to that one, I thought that we did a decent job. I think that there's a little gas left in the tank, and anytime New Japan would want me to do something for them with the style that they utilize, I would jump at the opportunity.
Now, with New Japan, obviously you mentioned Tanahashi and Nakamura, who are just A-plus stars, but then, of course, Okada is absolutely amazing. He's actually probably, I think, the best, and then obviously
I love him. I love Okada. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Okada, I should have mentioned Okada in that group too. The Rainmaker is amazing. 26, 28 years old, young, great look, good-looking kid. As beautiful a drop kick as you'll ever see. Great psychology for a young man. Really personable, very, very polite. They treated me like I was special. I mean, they treated me with. It was amazing the respect that I got from the guys in that roster, especially the young ones. A lot of the older guys I'd met before, and we were just buddies, and shooting a breeze and laughing, and those that spoke enough English. And my English is not that good either, so what the hell. But Okada, I'm glad you brought him up. He's absolutely a beautiful talent in a variety of ways. So, but I'm sorry I interrupted you. I should have mentioned him in the beginning. He's one of my favorite talents to watch on TV now, in any promotion.
Hey, no problem at all. Now, you guys called the card perfectly. Especially the second part of the show was absolutely amazing, especially Nakamura and Ibushi, and then Tanahashi and Okada was amazing. But another guy that was part of that show, a gaijin, if you will, AJ Styles, has been knocking it out of the park, and you were once quoted as saying, you can't believe you missed the boat on that guy. What are your thoughts on AJ Styles?
I love him. AJ has evolved and grown into one of the best in-ring performers in the world. He's a very professional family man. He's a credit to any locker room that he's in. When my crew, my talent relations staff, was going over the talent that we could acquire, AJ was when WCW we bought him out at WWE. AJ was kind of off the radar. As a matter of fact, he was off the radar. He wasn't getting much work on TV. He was very young. He was still really in the infancy of his career. And I don't know at that time, and it's funny, I had him on my podcast, which is available on iTunes. You go back and listen to that show. I'm kind of embarrassed that here's one of the greatest workers in the world. And I pride myself on having a pretty good eye for talent based on some of the guys we've signed over the years, and I whiffed. But it's the AJ Styles that we all admire today, at his own admission, was not the AJ Styles that I could have hired back in the day. And certainly an argument can be made, and maybe rightfully so, that, well, JR, you should have seen the fact this kid was going to grow into this world-class worker, but I didn't. I missed on that one. So I got no problem admitting that I made an error, but I'm really happy that he's done well. Quite frankly, he's probably done as well, if not better, by being able to work where he wanted and being able to be utilized as he was. And now he's calling his own shots. He's making a great living. He's working, as many dates as he chooses. He works where he wants, when he's not in New Japan. But AJ's he's a top 5-10 guy in the world. So I'm really happy for him. And plus, he's a good human being. He's a good father. Gainesville, Georgia boy, and so I have all the time in the world for AJ Styles. I'm just wishing nothing but the best.
It's funny you said that he was a miss, but not many misses from you as you were the head of talent relations. I mean, I could name probably a million guys, and and it'd still keep going. But three that really stick out: Mick Foley, The Rock, and a little guy by the name of Stone Cold Steve Austin. When you brought them over, did you initially see, them being basically three of the biggest stars ever in the history of the business?
Well, it's like going to a great restaurant. It's like going to one of those. It's like going to New Jersey and stopping at one of those diners that has a menu that's like 20 pages thick. There's a lot of really good things on the menu. It depends on what your taste is. All those guys brought something different. Every page you turn on the menu, you turn to a different section. There's the Italian section, the steaks or the whatever. Everybody brought something different to the dance. Foley I knew from helping him get booked in WCW from Dallas, and was always a fan of his work. Never thought he'd have a long career because of the abuse that he gave himself and his body. But I loved his character, the TV character, and the character of the human being. So, and such a bright, articulate guy. He was exactly what he didn't look like. He didn't look like he was a bright, articulate guy, but he was, and he is. Steve was that middle linebacker mentality, that Butkus, Ray Nitschke, Ray Lewis type headhunter that never played a perfect game, that's still looking for that big game, that felt slighted, that had a chip on his shoulder, but was athletic and competitive, and just had the wrestling aptitude that was scary. Great instincts. Different cat than Mick. Austin was not nearly as social as Foley. Austin trusted no one. He just was a different breed of cat. But I thought, man, he's a player. He is a player. He didn't dance to the right music in the WCW. He wasn't in the right political party, so to speak. He had some brushes with greatness there, but nothing sustained as he should have. And then The Rock had no experience. Both Austin and Foley were veterans. They had territory experience. Dwayne had no experience except being a third-generation guy, but he was a natural. He's a natural at everything. And his personality jumped off the page. His smile jumped off the page. When I watched him work out in the ring and watched him run the ropes, it was poetry in motion. He was very athletic, had great feet. He had a unique look with his ethnicity. He was college educated and degreed. I liked that because it meant he started a project and finished it. So I enjoyed that. The irony is that Austin didn't graduate, but he stayed in college 4 years. Foley graduated with a degree of the three guys you ask about, and so did Rock. I like guys that start something and finish it, and that means they'll do that in their work with the company if they get hired and then they make it. So all of them had a different story. All of them had different traits. I had to work the hardest to get Mick hired. Vince didn't know who Austin was because he didn't watch WCW. And he didn't watch ECW to any degree. All Steve was basically doing on ECW was promos, by and large, little wrestling. Foley had tried to come to work for WWE several times and had been turned down, and my persuasive powers and being new on the job got Mick hired because Vince wanted me to know what it was like to really believe in someone, and then when they didn't make it, how do you react? Because Vince really didn't think Mick was going to make it, but then he soon changed his mind and became a big Foley fan, and Mick had a great run there. Made seven-figure income, and he wasn't sleeping in his car and all those crazy things. And then The Rock was just, he was can't miss in my view, and we paid him at the time the most money that I'd ever offered anybody to sign a developmental contract, and I just thought that he was going to be special. We didn't screw him up creatively, and he didn't have some kind of tick or a gene in him that was going to just not allow him to stay out of the trouble. He was a can't miss guy, and he was that. Obviously, he didn't miss, and I don't know if you guys are a fan of Ballers on Sunday nights on HBO. It's one of my favorite shows, and it's so real because I've been around so many guys like that in the wrestling business. And when I worked with the Falcons and NFL, it's scary real. And so they're doing a great job. They got another season. It's already been renewed for another year. So I'm very proud of Dwayne, and he's built an amazing business with $7 Entertainment.
Yeah, he's on that untouchable level now, and anything he touches is basically an overnight sensation. But, you know, you talk about that being head of talent relations, and you took over for J.J. Dillon, whom we spoke with months ago, and J.J. Dillon classified it as being a thankless job. Now, with you bringing in those three guys, now you brought in a bunch of guys, but those three are the big standouts. Do you think in the transition from J.J. to yourself that it was time for that new blood to come in and it really, I mean, quote, either the new generation or the birth of the Attitude Era? Like, do you think it was really time for a changing of the guard overall with J.J. stepping down?
I thought J.J. did a phenomenal job, and I have the utmost respect for J.J. He's right. It is a thankless job. It was a thankless job when I had it. I had one recruiting class, or we had one recruiting class that included, it included Brock Lesnar, John Cena, Dave Bautista, and Randy Orton, along with Shelton Benjamin, who was the best pure athlete of the group. So we had a lot of good luck, and we hired a lot of good guys, but still a thankless job. They're still human beings. Everybody still has issues. You got to correct issues. You got to be the disciplinarian. And I was doing the payroll, so the payoffs are done discretionarily. That's always a cause for consternation. So it's a thankless job. And when you got to let somebody go, that's never fun. And there's always, somebody's always got to go. It's like a football team. That's why they have a 53-man roster in the National Football League. You can only carry so many. And when you want somebody to be added to the roster, you got to do the math, and somebody's got to say adios. So I don't know if it was time for a change. Vince allowed me to do my job differently than JJ, and maybe that, and I think that's McMahon's management philosophy. He wanted to change, and so my point is that when JJ hired talent, he had to get it approved or run the talent by Vince. When I hired talent, by and large, so there's some exceptions, but when I hired most of the talents, I hired them without consultation. On several occasions, more often than not, with Vince, because he was involved and busy doing other things, and I thought that was my job. I was going to be responsible for managing them. I was going to take the responsibility if they were amiss. So I didn't. JJ had a different job description in that respect than did I. So I'm not saying that negative about JJ, because I love JJ. It's just that Vince saw that the department needed to have some changes made structurally, and I was just happened to be the next batter up.
Right.
Bruce Pritchard had that job for a while, but it didn't fit his skill sets or his personality. He didn't like it, so I was put in that role and was there for a long time. And I had a great run. I was very, very fortunate. I had a really good team around me. Jerry Briscoe will never get the credit that he deserves for scouting, and we probably wouldn't have signed Brock Lesnar if it hadn't been for Jerry Briscoe. And we recruited Brock Lesnar for 2 years. But Jerry Briscoe is the primary reason that we signed Brock Lesnar. And then when he signed him, then I acquired him. And so it's always been a team effort there. But Jerry was a viable member of the team. And then of course, then the developmental program that we had, the forerunner of today's performance center, certainly was important. You know, the guys that worked in Danny Davis, Les Thatchers, you know, all the guys. I don't want to leave out any names, but all the guys that worked for the talent. You know, those guys were Al Snow and Tom Pritchard. All those guys were key members of coaching, teaching fundamentals to a bunch of green guys. Brock Lesnar was a pro wrestler. He wasn't even a wrestling fan. The Rock wasn't refined. Dory Funk Jr. was one of the guys that was one of my coaches. You know, and he refined guys like Edge and Christian. He helped turn Kurt Angle, who wasn't a pro wrestling fan. We signed Kurt Angle. So I'm very proud of my lineage of the guys that we hired and the guys that we hired to work with them. And all I was ever trying to do was to do what was best for WWE, because that's how I was raised by my father and my mother, is that if you're going to work for somebody, you know, and you're going to take their money, always give them the best effort. You always put the goose that lays the golden eggs before you put yourself. And
Definitely.
that's the way I worked, and it was a simple formula. But we got lucky on some guys and had some good classes, and so I don't really know if it's time for a change. So I don't know if it was time for JJ to go. JJ was very burned out. It was a very thankless job. He had it for a long time. You can only take it so long, and and we were in a real tough spot at that time. Revenues were down. Wrestling people were taking drastic cuts in pay, including JJ, including myself, and others in the wrestling side of the business. And so it was a challenging time for a lot of people. And a lot of people in the company bolted. They they cleaned out their desk and they left. They deserted. I'm not saying JJ deserted. Office people. They thought when they saw these guys leaving and they heard about the pay deductions and all that, they bolted. They jumped off what they perceived to be a sinking ship. And all I can tell you is that Vince told me it took 5 minutes. I'm going to cut your pay or I'll release you. And here's what I'll pay you. And if you want to stay, I will. When things change, you'll never regret financially that you stayed. And he kept his word, and to the letter. And he paid me more than, and I earned more there than I ever dreamed in my lifetime in the wrestling business. And that's because Vince kept his word to me about how I would be taken care of if I stayed loyal, of which I did.
And that's fantastic, because that's a time period prior to the Attitude Era, just on the cusp of it, where, you know, sometimes I think people forget how tight the business really was getting at that point. But now you mentioned Vince, you mentioned talent relations. You were also still announcing while you were doing talent relations. But let's go back a little bit to when you started announcing and you were working for the Cowboy. Now, yep. I know you probably said it a million times, but I'd love to hear your take on it. Working for the Cowboy, Bill Watts, of course, and working for Vince McMahon, and I guess in the eras you worked for them, were there any similarities with them, or were they just completely on two different pages?
Well, ironically, I'm working on my autobiography, pardon me, and I've been lucky enough to write with the help of my wife. Dennis Brent was involved in that process. We've written a couple of New York Times bestsellers, one a cookbook and then the Stone Cold Truth. But I'm finally getting around to writing my own story, and working with a fellow by the name of Scott Williams, who worked on Bill Watts' book and Terry Funk's book, brilliant lawyer out of Houston, and Paul O'Brien, who wrote the three best wrestling novels I've ever picked up, called Blood Red Turns Dollar Green. And any wrestling fan that hasn't read Blood Red Turns Dollar Green, I strongly suggest you read them. They're works of fiction, but it's kind of like the Mafia meets the Suplex, and it's really, really cool. And it's just amazing. He's an amazing wordsmith. So I'm working on that, but I'm going back and remembering a lot of things. But the Vince McMahon, Bill Watts alpha male personality started for me in my life long before I ever dreamed of meeting either man. They started with my father. And you talk about alpha male. McMahon and Watts got nothing on my dad. Nothing. He was 6'3", 275, wore size 15 ring, 14 boot, monster of a guy. And he was old school to the core. He was my John Wayne. There was no gray area. This is black, this is white, this is what the way it is. And he was a man's man. So when I went to work for Bill, it was like going to work for my dad. Watts was a taskmaster. He had one way of doing it, his way, and the right way. His way was the right way because he was paying you to do a job. So whatever he needed you to do, you did to the best of your ability, unless you didn't want to cash the checks. And I've never failed to cash a check. Watts I was ready for that whole deal. It was just a new genre, new terms, new business. I thought I would have a summer job in pro wrestling after promoting these spot shows in college and being quote-unquote discovered by Bill Watts. I thought I'd have a nice summer job. I'd go back after the summer, finish my last semester of college, and I'd have some cool stories to tell my buddies over nickel beer night. And 40 years later, I'm still, I guess, waiting to go back and register for that last semester of school. So then going through my run with all the chaos and the dysfunctional corporate family in WCW, and then getting finally to WWE, Vince was a breath of fresh air because you did have one decision maker there, and that was not the case in WCW while I was there. It was chaotic. But the thing about Vince is that other than my dad, who had always had two jobs to make ends meet, and one was working on our farm, which is deadly manual labor, I never met anybody in my life that works as hard as Vince. So by the time I got to Vince, I was ready for Vince. And we had, contrary to what most people are going to think, we had when we were one-on-one, it was one of the most positive, rewarding, motivating experiences and relationships I've ever had. I love working with him, but he is he's a unique dude, and but he was challenging. But I was raised in a challenging environment, so it really wasn't a big deal. And I'm going to be writing about that. People are going to say, well, I would never guess that. So I'm kind of giving away a little bit of my book. But he's the hardest working human being I've ever been around. My dad would be 1A. And Vince is going to be 70 years old the day after SummerSlam, and is still going strong, still lifting heavy, still going to the gym. He's doing things that I don't know of another near 70-year-old person ever in my life does. And but training is his hobby. He likes to work. He has said sleep is our enemy. He loves to work, and he loves the business. And whether you like his philosophies or his product or how he produces TV or whatever, that's certainly one's prerogative. But to think that he doesn't like the business anymore or he's not invested emotionally in it is somewhat ludicrous. And it's damn sure not because he needs another payday. He's got quite a bit of money. I think he's probably good for his lifetime, his kids' lifetime, their kids' lifetime, et cetera, et cetera. So, challenging, yes, but always. But it was always. I thought it was exhilarating. I thought it was exciting because I love the business. We shared that passion, and I tell people it's this way. Look, it's like being on a coaching staff. You got a head coach. Vince was a head coach. I might want to run the ball more. He wants to run 4 wides and throw the ball around the field. We'll argue that point. He'll win the argument more often than not because he's the head man. But at the end of the day, we both love the game. And so that's kind of how I look at that deal. You know, we did have some philosophical differences, but I just don't believe that's a major deal. Because we both love the business. We both love our destination, but we both would be willing to take different routes to get there.
Well said. Now, as we wind it down just a little bit here, one question I was always very, very curious of. You worked with, as far as announcing, you worked with Cornette as your partner, Terry Funk, Paul Heyman, oh my God, Michael Hayes, Jerry Lawler, even Macho Man, Jesse Ventura, the great Tony Schiavone, the great Gordon Soley. My personal favorite, you with Dusty Rhodes. But who would you say is your favorite partner that you were ever announced with, or can you even pick one?
Well, that'd be like saying, who's your favorite child? All those guys are friends. If they're not friends, they're people I respect. I had a very unique relationship with Ventura that was negative. We should have been so much better than we were, but I was egocentric and jealous of what he was making based on what I was making, and I was unprofessional, and I did not hold up my end of the bargain because I didn't want us to be good. I didn't want to work with him, and it was all for the wrong reasons. So Jesse and JR should have been pretty damn good, and I don't think that we were as good as we could have been. And I take all the responsibility for that. Paul Heyman had the ability, because of our relationship, he was like a younger cousin that would come from New York to Oklahoma to spend the summer and would drive me batty, crazy. But he was so amazingly talented and intelligent and got it and had instincts and aptitude that were beyond the pale. And I gave him his first break, got him on national TV, got him recognized on national television on WCW and TBS, because the booking committee didn't want to work with him as a talent. He was a handful. You can have him. There was no argument. They were glad to give him to me. And I thought we had great chemistry. I love working with Paul. He brought out the best in me. He would legitimately piss me off. And whether he meant to, now he'll tell you he meant to, and it was all a big grand plan. That's Paul. But he did, and it would fire me up, and I could take my work to another level. Then sometimes I would do the same thing to him, and then he would lash out and heel venom, and so he was very, very compelling to work for. The guys, the wrestlers that I worked with, Terry Funk was very underrated. Dusty would make up words. If Dusty would say a word that started with the same letter, he made the rest of it up. He thought he was doing okay, and he was hilarious. And the great thing about Dream is that he was writing most of this television that we were doing, and so he knew exactly what he wanted out of it. So he would give me the Reader's Digest version in a mini production meeting that might take 10 minutes to go over a 2-hour show, and we were done. We went out and called the ball game. So whatever happened, whatever you put on the monitor, we called it. and he was fun to work with. And I think some of my most underrated broadcasts are with Dusty Rhodes. I was amazingly surprised at how good Terry Funk was. And that was just a joy. People that haven't heard us work together, not because of me, but because of him, should listen, because you'll hear that he had great psychology. He was a terrific showman and storyteller, and he put the talent over. A lot of wrestlers that do commentary just want to put themselves over, and Terry was not in that ilk. And Jim Cornette, hard to say that he couldn't been if that was his focus and he wasn't a manager, he arguably could go down as one of the very, very best of all time. Much like Bobby Heenan, Cornette was just from south of Mason-Dixon line, but he had the great natural comedic timing. He had a sharp wit. He knew how to get talent over. He knew when to get in and when to get out. Some of the beauty of being a great announcer or a great announced team is what you don't say or when you do lay out. So I've been really, really lucky. I've had a lot of guys that carried me along and made me look better than I was. But to say there's one guy, Lawler and I had the great run in WWE when it was so competitive and people were hanging on every word. The Monday Night Wars are so, topical. And I thought that we represented WWE well in that era. And I get it all the time. I get it every day. We want JR and the King back. We want JR and the King back. Well, that's just, quite frankly, likely never going to happen. But we had a great run. It just so happened that it came when the ratings got to be massive. And I thought we held our end of the bargain of storytelling up very well. I think we did our best work when Mr. McMahon was the top villain on the show, because it really allowed us to work kind of unencumbered and let us be ourselves and let it and be organic and use our instincts more. And we had good instincts because both of us were territory guys. Both of us were lifelong fans, and we both got it that we are there to get the talent over. And by getting the talent over, you organically and naturally get yourself over. But you do it in that order. Talent first, issues, angles, storylines, all that. And if you do a good enough job of that, then you will gain some popularity as a broadcaster. So Jerry and I had the longest, most successful run of any of my partners, but all of them were fun to work with. Bob Caudle, I love working with Bob Caudle. One of the greatest. Here's a guy that was the voice of Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, was the play-by-play voice, and they get this new guy in named Jim Ross with no black hat. And Bob, by the way, you're going to start doing color, and this new guy's going to take your spot. And he'd been the voice of that brand for decades. And he never held any animosity toward me. He was my writing partner. He was my friend. I think he's the most underrated announcer that I ever worked with in my life. And so that was really cool. Dusty Rhodes had the vision to put Tony Schiavone and I together on Clash of Champions 1, two play-by-play guys. I thought, and when in those days, Tony was as good as it got. He did a terrific job. How you want to do this? I said, it's real easy. You're the tenured guy on TBS. You get us in the segments, you get us out of the segments, and we'll share it in the middle. And I love working with him. I just did a podcast with him that's going to air in a few weeks. I have a new podcast that drops every Tuesday night at 9 Eastern. This week, for example, John Pollock of the Fight Network, very intelligent guy. God almighty, he's so much smarter than me. I just want to be quiet and let him go. We talk about WWE Battleground, and we talk about WrestleMania in Texas, Ring of Honor, the Chaos in TNA, and the New Japan. Who are they with, or are they going to be with more than one? They're going to date several people, not go steady. John's a USC guy, MMA guy. So podcast-wise, Shivani and I could tape one about a week ago, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Just like old times. I think the last time he and I did a podcast was the last year during the All-Star season because he's the voice of the Gwinnett Braves, the AAA farm team of the Atlanta Braves. So I catch him on his All-Star week break. That show did well over 1 million downloads, like 1.8 million or something. So people wanted to hear he and I together again and tell these stories. So there's one of those shows are coming up, but the show that airs this week is very smart. We don't try to reinvent history like some wrestling podcasters do. We don't take pot shots at people. I do my normal humor that sometimes is misconstrued by some, but it's a good show. But Tony's podcast will be good, and I love working with him. And then I got those few at-bats with Gordon Soley. The I Quit match, Flair, Funk, Gary Hart at ringside, referee Tommy Young, Gordon doing color, me doing play-by-play, and Soley, as usual, he did the less is best. 5 letters, 2 words, I quit. And, we had a little flask at ringside to make sure that he would have a little taste of alcohol during the show, and but not enough to adversely affect what we were doing in a 2-hour broadcast. And during commercial breaks, he would have a little sip. But that was one of the big honors for me in my career, one of my lifetime, is if I picked out one show just to go back and watch one match, because of all the participants, Ric Flair and Terry Funk had reinvented himself, Tommy Young, arguably the best referee ever, at least one of the top 3 or 4 or 5, Gary Hart, amazing manager. If you can find Gary Hart's book, if you're lucky, you should read it. But it's damn near impossible to get your hands on. Why it's not being reprinted is a mystery to me. And then Gordon Soley, and then I'm tagging along for the ride. It was just an amazing amalgamation of talent in an I Quit match where the heel actually cheated to gain unfair advantages, where both men sold. They genuinely sold and made you feel and have emotionally invested in the match. And the heel didn't go take a shortcut. He loudly shouted, I quit. So the professionalism of Terry Funk added to the legacy and the legend of Ric Flair. And all the parts came together in that match, as it should. Selling, being a heel, how to really be a heel. Not to be cool so you could sell shirts, but to really be a villain. And Terry Funk was he's an Oscar-winning villain without question.
No doubt that is absolutely one of the greatest matches of all time. And I was actually going to ask you what your favorite match to call was. You actually beat me to it. But if I could just ask you, who was actually your favorite wrestler to call? I remember as a kid, you were very, very, me too, of course, was very into Sting. And, during the WCW days, and you would always get very excited for the Stinger. But do you have a favorite wrestler that you've called all time?
Well, the Sting thing was he started in Mid-South. I saw him from, he'd gone to Tennessee, he and Hellwig, very, very briefly. Then they came to work for Bill in Mid-South, and so I've known him forever. So I had a great rapport with him. I had an emotional investment in that character. So when he was in WCW, he was our guy. He was one of the survivors that made it after the buyout. After Crockett bought out UWF, Sting was one of the guys that actually survived. So I kind of felt a kinship to him, and I liked him a great deal personally. I think the guy that probably brought out the most organic, guttural passion for me was Stone Cold. And I would say that later on, guys like The Rock, because I signed him, and he was my boy from day one as a rookie and no territory background, and he helped us mold him into something extraordinary. But then there were other guys. Shawn Michaels coming back after being gone 4 years was amazing to me, and I got so into his matches. And I was being phased out toward his run there with Undertaker, but I got to call WrestleMania 25 in that one match, and I'm thankful for that. So there are different guys at different times in my life and my career, and their life and their careers that brought out a little more juice in me. But over the long haul, Austin from almost start to finish was special. But he wasn't the only one. Like you as aptly pointed out, Sting was my Stone Cold before Stone Cold became that guy. And but they were. But before Sting, there was Dr. Death. He was he was like my little brother. Not so little, but he was like a brother to me. And it was a great honor but also a great heartbreak to give the eulogy at his funeral. I've been able to give the eulogy at Jack Briscoe's funeral and Steve Dr. Death Williams' funeral, and I'm not trying to make a career out of doing eulogies, but it's just nice enough that the family's thinking enough about the relationships I had with the deceased that they asked me to say a few words. And so, but Doc was very, very special. Doc should have had a long run in Jim Crockett Promotions. Doc should have been NWA champion, at least for a run, because he damn sure would have been believable. But he just didn't feel that was going to be a steady foundation to build his career on, and so he decided to go to the Japanese route, and that worked out for him just fine. So, but you get emotionally attached. How can you listen to the Undertaker Mick Foley, the Mankind Hell in a Cell match and say I wasn't emotionally involved in that one because of Mick Foley? I thought he died. I thought we killed him right there. I thought we, meaning the company, or booking that match and putting the pressure on this big main event that he had paid the ultimate price to have a great match. So everything everybody hears on that soundbite there was nothing rehearsed, because Lawler and I didn't even know what they were going to do that night. And I was talking to Jerry the other day, and I said, Jerry, do you remember us sitting down and going over, finishes and stuff like that? And he said, no, we didn't want to know. We just wanted to get surprised. And then the other day I was talking, this is a few days ago, I was talking to Bob Cottle, who hasn't been feeling well, and I said, Bob, let me ask you a question. And I said, when you and I were working together, did you remember that we were really dependent upon knowing what the finishes were? He says, well, I know. We hardly ever knew. So I think sometimes announcers in today's world, I don't know this for WWE, I don't know for any promotion, I might be dead wrong. The less you know about what's supposed to happen, the better off you are. And let your natural instincts and that way you don't have to become a professional actor. You are actually a broadcaster, and you broadcast what you see, and you communicate it in a organic, natural fashion. And I think that's why at one point in time my work was accepted well, because the product fit my style. It was physical, it was snug, it was athletic, and my first wrestling boss, Bill Watts, wanted me to call everything as if it were a shoot. And that's why I kind of miss the fact that I never got a chance to do any significant work in MMA or UFC, because I think my style would fit MMA or UFC to a T. But, I think that ship has sailed, and I'm not, as Lawler would say, one can't grieve forever. So I watch it as a fan, and unfortunately, it's a blessing or a curse, and I think it's a curse. I broadcast every show I watch whether it's Lucha Underground or TNA or Ring of Honor or what the hell, I can't stop it. I can't turn it off. I don't talk out loud, but I'm thinking what I would say, what I would do, instead of just enjoying it. That's why I enjoy shows like Ray Donovan or True Detectives or Ballers, because I don't know what's going to happen. I can actually be a fan and not a participant.
Definitely well said, and I'd love to get in your head and hear some of those things that you're saying during, maybe ROH or TNA or Lucha Underground or even WWE. But I want to just pick your brain just for a second and actually just a prediction or two. Now, Undertaker's fighting Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. What is your prediction on that match, and do you think that it possibly leads to another match, a third, trilogy match, if you will, at WrestleMania 32 in Dallas?
Well, I tell you what I'll do. I'll make you. I don't know how to answer this. I know how to answer it. A couple of things. One is on this week's podcast, I talk about how I would book their program. Secondly, as we are recording this, which is on Tuesday,
Mm-hmm.
I have written a blog today of how I would book the program between Lesnar and Brock Lesnar. And I would not go the traditional route of Taker wins and we go to the rubber match. But I have a very unique way of making that work. So I will encourage your listeners to check out my blog at jrsbarbecue.com and read my thoughts. And they're just one man's opinion. But I will tell you that I would not go the traditional rubber match route. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'm very, very interested in reading that. I will definitely have to check that out. But I just another quick question for you pertaining to Seth Rollins, the current WWE champion. Do you see a long title run in his future? Because right now he's going to be feuding with John Cena. Do you see him as like the future of the company per se and being the headliner for WrestleMania 32?
I don't know that the WWE champion has to be the future of the company. I don't know that any one person should be the future of the company. I think if it is, it's poor management because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. I don't believe in that at all. But I am very proud of the worker that he has become. He has a great mind for the business, extremely strong work ethic. He's a booker's dream. In other words, he's a beatable champion. In the territory days or the live event days now, theoretically, on any given night that he's defending the title, he can be beaten. He's not so physically imposing that he looks unbeatable. So I like that. If you're going to have a heel champion, then I like one that has vulnerability. And this kid has got great. He's built his body up well. He trains religiously. He eats amazingly well. Which who cares about what he eats? Well, it kind of makes you are what you eat and how you train. And he's very serious about all that. So I love this. That means to me he has made a commitment. So I'm a big Seth Rollins fan. I would not take the championship off of Seth Rollins until WrestleMania. And then at WrestleMania, I might, if I have something that I really believe works, then that's where he would drop the title. And by then, he would have had it a year. And if he's not over and he's not a made man within a year after being the champion and after continuing to improve his game, then you can't blame the promotion. You can't totally blame anybody, but between the promotion, the company, and the talent, a year should give you plenty of time to establish that you're a star. And to me, he's already a star. But I see him getting better at what he does. He's like any of the villains on TV, whether WWE, Ring of Honor, TNA, whatever. Lucha Underground, it didn't matter to me. There are not enough guys cheat to gain unfair advantages, and until villains stop working for the pop. This is awesome. If I were a villain in the true sense of the word, that would piss me off to no end, that the crowd was chanting that my work was awesome. My work should be menacing and dangerous and dirty, and because it enhances your dancing partner and makes the baby face a bigger, stronger, more powerful ticket-selling, merchandise-selling entity. So too many heels had rather work for a pop than work for heat. And you take that angst away, and there's that fine line between good and evil, and it's almost a race now to where it's just very, very faint. If it disappears, I say good luck to the business, because if you take away the heel villain dynamic, I don't know what you got. I don't know who I'm supposed to root for. And that'd be like in the NFL. Okay, we're not going to play any more home games. All the games are going to be on the road, and we're going to play in different stadiums, but no home stadiums. So if you had an NFL game, the home team is normally the baby face. Last I looked, the visitors are normally the heels. Last I looked. But let's say you're the Giants and the Jets, and they're going to play each other, and they do the home and home. That's not a good example. The Eagles and the Giants, and they're going to play their games in Cincinnati. Okay, who's the baby face and who's the heel in Cincinnati Stadium? Is it who can get the most fans to drive to the stadium? It makes no sense. You've got to have a protagonist and an antagonist in any presentation of that nature, sports or movies. I haven't seen Ant-Man, but I guarantee you there's some heels in Ant-Man. Or that movie what's his name?
Paul Rudd.
There's heels in that movie, right? I mean,
yeah.
Did Schwarzenegger just make another Terminator movie? Are there not baby faces and heels in that movie? Are there not people that are trying to eliminate Schwarzenegger? They're the heels. It's just that it's the way that we're built, society-wise. It's the way that we're wired. When a team comes into Norman to play my Sooners, they're the heels. If you don't believe me, just listen to the 80-something thousand that are in the stands. And they drown out that 5,000 or 8,000 or so that come from with the visiting team, who are the heels. And maybe that's too crazy of an analogy. I just believe it's woven into the fabric of our society, and that's how I see things. And if pro wrestling gets too far away from having clear who the baby faces and who the heels are, I just don't know how you continue to keep the fans connected emotionally. And maybe I'm too old school to get it, and maybe I'll be proven wrong. And if so, I'll sure be watching, because I love the genre, and I try to watch as much of it as I can every week. That's what DVRs are for.
That's why you are the best, JR, because you're old school and you tell it like it is, and there's not many left. But before the cowboy hat is hung up for good, and you look back and you think of the career, now you already were getting on that plane to LaGuardia, and you thought about what you were going to be doing when you hung it up. But what's JR's legacy going to be on the wrestling business when he does hang up that black hat for good?
Oh, I hope it's that fact that one of us as a wrestling fan made it and got one of the best seats in the house for probably longer than he deserved. And a wrestling fan made it to the Hall of Fame, and he lived a dream life as nothing, and never changed being a fan. Never changed being a wrestling fan. So a wrestling fan made it to the promised land would be my sentence.